welcome to the Planning Committee on the 5th of July 23. So it's the second meeting of this committee, and so welcome to the two new members who are, or three new members who are substituting tonight. So is it agreed that I sign the minutes of the previous meeting? Need to just point out that on the supplementary agenda advice, there is details of the minute given the reason for refusal for the Avenue Tennis Club. Yeah. Oh yes, yeah, and I need to agree the joint committee meeting as well. Is that agreed? Excellent. Urgent matters? I have none. Does anybody wish to have any urgent matters of reason of special circumstances? If not, declare declarations of disposable pecuniary interests and other significant interests. Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of later on the agenda on Broom Hill. Sorry, Chairman. In terms of the application for Broom Hill, I'd just like it clarified who the actual applicant is on that property, and if it's the previous owner or is it a brand new owner. Depending on your answer is what I will declare.
It is not the previous owner of 20 Broom Hill. This is 18 Broom Hill. Right. Is that any help?
Thank you.
Because I remember you had to declare
nothing to declare then, Chairman.
You had to. You embarrassingly had to declare that you were a friend of the previous owner of 20. Yeah.
Sorry, Chairman, I'd have to embarrassingly say I was never a friend of that previous applicant.
I know that, but Councillor Trancher, the former Councillor Trancher, didn't. He had to tell me. All right, okay. Right, any other interests at all? So we're going to move on to item 5. Prior to moving on to item 5, can I ask the legal officer, who's not the legal officer I talked to the other day, but she just to outline the position we find ourselves in regarding planning issues. We act as a planning committee, but we also have another hat on, all of us, as us councillors, that we are corporate parents. If we were sitting on a planning committee in Maidstone or anywhere else in Kent, we wouldn't have those two hats. We will have a single hat on, but we do have two hats in this scenario. So, Laura? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, I understand the issue with the two hats. At this committee, however, you are only wearing one of those hats. I appreciate there is a second hat in relation to corporate parenting, but that doesn't come into play during this committee. So when determining the planning application tonight, you can only look at what are material planning considerations. Those have been set out in the report, and I think Dave can answer any questions as they come up, as can I. But those are your material planning considerations. Any issues in terms of who the provider of that care might be and whether or not that care would be sufficient, that would come down to social services to enforce if there was a problem at that point, but it isn't a planning consideration for you this evening.
Thank you for that clarification. It's not a happy state of affairs when we have two hats on. I do know that Children's Services are going to be looking at this to make sure that they give support to the planning team. Because at the moment the planning team is taking the brunt of these decisions because the planning department is required to consider the application in front of it. And there are a lot more coming down the line because of, if I remember correctly, Ofsted have changed their position regarding that all things should be dotted and the T's crossed, e.g. Crying for planning permission. Councillor Galvin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Is sufficiency of supply a planning issue?
Do you want to answer that? Oh, no, Mr. Harris just coming.
Chairman, the report covers the fact that there is a need for this accommodation in Medway, and that is a material consideration, yes.
So let's move to item 5. And Mr. Harris?
Chairman, would it be helpful if James Harmon, who's the head of Children's Commissioning, just outlines the licensing side and the enforcement side? Would that be helpful, Chairman?
I think it will be. So James is here as the head of Children's Services Commissioning. And you can give us an outline about the current position that Children's Services find itself in. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies, I've never been to planning before, so I'll do my best to follow the lead. So I'll just give a very succinct background to this. So one of the things that Dave and I had spoken about was the increase in the amount of applications for supported accommodation and children's homes in the Medway area. This is partially sort of twofold, really. So in April 23, Ofsted changed some of their requirements, and that all supported accommodation providers, so that's providers that provide accommodation for young people 16 plus in care, now need to register with Ofsted. That comes into full force in October, so at the moment lots of people are going through that Ofsted process and registering for Ofsted. For that, most of them will need some kind of planning permission, unless for the dwelling, I believe, is for under 2 people, which is going to be a very small amount. So that's one of the reasons why there's a lot more that will be coming through planning committee. I imagine in the next few months as well, there'll probably be more people that are coming forward. That will be a combination of providers who we know and who are supporting some of our young people. It will be a mix of providers that are providing support for young people from other local authorities, and it will be a mix of providers who have seen the outline sufficiency strategy that the council has, which says that actually we need more beds for our young people in Medway and are looking for an opportunity to kind of develop their business. So there's sort of 3 different categories within that. So the sufficiency strategy, as I've mentioned, was published and agreed by council earlier this year, and identified both the needs that we had across children's services for our children and young people, so in the section that's called A Place Called Home. We know corporately that a number of our young people, or a significant number of our young people, we're unable to place in and around the Medway area due to lack of sufficiency in beds, but we also know that a lot of other local authorities will place within the boundaries of Medway, therefore using some of our sufficiency. So the corporate outline is effectively we need more beds for more local beds for our young people. My understanding is that that's not anything that can be stipulated within a planning committee or within planning. So the best that we can do from our perspective is try and work with providers that come forward and maybe put forward planning or show an interest in planning to encourage them to work with Medway, and for us to better understand what they've got already and how that works and whether it doesn't work. The other thing as Children's Services that we do is we work very closely with the youth offending team, with our crime and police commissioning partnership and violence reduction unit, and try and share intelligence about different areas and different streets. That's absolutely not putting young people in care in a bracket where we think that they're going to be placed equals something negative. We are equally as interested in protecting where our young people are placed from other people within that area. So I just wanted to kind of make that distinction there. So that's probably a brief enough overview for now. Very happy to go into more detail at a later date if that would be helpful, or take any questions on that.
Okay, well, we'll come back to you as required throughout the evening, because we have 3 items, which are essentially children's homes, care homes. So, Mr. Harris, if you kick off with the first one, I'll come back later on, yeah?
Thank you, Chairman. First application relates to 7 Eglington Crescent, 7 Eglington Drive, which is in Wainscott. So this is the relatively new estate in Wainscott. It's also formed part of a development the other side of the road here, and this is the Wainscott bypass, which comes around here, 4 Elms Hill, going up there, Who Road, through here. This is the application site or property in here, which is one half of a pair of semi-detached properties. It's access from Eglington Drive, just through here, into that cul-de-sac, effectively of 2 properties just there, and it's that, we'll talk about that property there, which has got 2 parking spaces just over here, as shown just there. Some photographs of the site. So it's the left-hand side on this photo, which is the application property, i.e. that one there, shown just here. Existing plans showing the ground floor layout and the existing upper layouts there in terms of three bedrooms and a shower room. And then the proposed plans, which show 2 bedrooms on the upper floor and then a 3rd room, which is used partly as an office and partly as a bedroom for the carers. Members, you'll see in your report that this is an application from C3, which is a dwelling house, to C2, children's care home. You'll see from condition 2 that we're looking to restrict it to no more than 2 children. The report on page 25 goes through why it requires consent, and it's because of that extra element of care. If this was a foster home, if the carers were living there all the time, this wouldn't require planning permission. The reason it requires planning permission is that element of care, which is done on a rota basis, with workers staying for a period, then being replaced by others. So that's the reason why it requires planning permission. In terms of the planning considerations, they are set out on page 26 and policy H8. And it talks about the proposal not adversely affecting nearby residential amenity. In appropriate cases, occupants having a degree of mobility and independence within reasonable walking distance of shops, that there is adequate amenity space for the residents, and that parking is adequate for staff, visitors, service vehicles. The final one there, which is the property is too large to reasonably expect its occupation by a single household, really doesn't apply in this, because what we want is for the children being cared for to essentially be in a relatively small house, but like they were living as part of a family. In this instance here, you'll see that the existing property could very easily be occupied by at least 3 people, possibly 4 people. If we've got a mother and father and 2 children, there would be 4 people at this property, maybe even more than that. There is no reason why there'd be any further, in planning terms, why there'd be any further disturbance to neighbouring residential amenity as a result of this proposal compared to being used as a normal family property. In addition to that, in terms of amenity for the prospective residents, they have this garden to the rear, and that is sufficient to cater for the needs of those residents. And as I pointed out earlier, there are 2 car parking spaces to the front, which again provide for the carers that will be working or providing the care at the premises. On that basis, members, there are no planning reasons why this application should not be accepted, and we're recommending approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Any member? Councillor Holcroft-Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I am a little bit troubled and concerned about this application, purely because there are 3 of these tonight. I understand what has been presented, but locally we are a children's service that is under scrutiny from Ofsted. I believe that this is the new cottage industry. There was an incident in 2019 in Margate where there were a trio of houses for children who were not able to be in foster care, but they were in, if you like, children's homes, but near the seafront. And there was so much antisocial behaviour where young people without any NVQ level 3 or any kind of accommodation qualifications were running, I hate the term, but riot. Okay, and what also, so in the end, these homes had to be closed down. We have a recent article that I've read from Sefton Council. They now have over 22 children's homes, okay, in their authority, and they are a small council like we are, and they are now saying no more. Now, I'm troubled and concerned because I am a survivor of foster care. I'm a foster carer myself. I'm also chair of Children's and Young People's Committee, and I suppose I know from 13 years of Tory government, we have had so many cutbacks to all sorts of social care that we need to be looking after and doing a first-class job to the children of which we're corporate parents for and charged to support without having this little cottage industry, because I believe our accommodation, our housing prices are lower than anywhere else, and it's quite near London. And, you know, a semi-detached house, yes, it does have 4 occupants. It's not a very big house, but I would say if these young people are not conducive to being a foster family, then they either have a lot of additional needs, including maybe social, emotional, mental health, or I don't know, everyone's an individual, but they may need a kind of, how can I say, a chill out room or a therapy room or stuff like that. Well, there's nowhere that could be, you know, there's no provision in that dwelling once you've got the workers or the worker that sleeps over and the children to do that therapeutic additional care that I think they need. We have in Gillingham not enough school places. You know, and I just think there's a lot of drain on our, you know, infrastructure already. So I am a little bit troubled and concerned.
Any other councillor? Yeah? Okay. Councillor Bandit-Karas.
So it was more of a direct question to James. Just how is it decided whether our children go into a foster home or a children's home? Because I think I'm concerned that we approve a lot of children's homes and then as a wider service we stop focusing on getting foster parents because we've got lots of children's homes where there's still beds. So I don't know what the distinction is.
Mr. Horan, you want to go on?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So it's all based on the child's individual care plan and about what their particular needs are. So some young people, as Councillor Howcroft-Scott very clearly said, really thrive in a foster environment. That's a really good thing for them. There are other young people and children who don't want a replacement family and need a different sort of care because they don't want to replace their family and actually they might need more support around that. So it will really be down to somebody's individual care needs. There's a third part of this. So you've got your children's homes, you've got your foster homes, but you've also got your 16 plus supported accommodation, which is the readiness for adulthood, for want of a better word. So those young people who are, into college or are moving on in their life and they need to be sort of almost step down to see how they manage in a sort of semi-independent setting. So some of these provisions could be that we're looking at our 16, 17-year-olds who will have some wraparound support with them, but will start to have to manage things like, going and doing their shopping and booking doctor's appointments and those sorts of things. So we've got 3 different elements there. But it's very much driven by the care plan and what the social worker wants, with the voice of the young person in there as well. So sometimes the young person will say, I really think this is the type of thing I'd go to. So that's how it's decided. There is a real mix in Medway across those three elements. And I think the thing that I didn't mention earlier is, I don't think it would be any great secret to say that nationally there is a significant issue with the amount of available foster carers, the amount of available children's homes, the amount of available support workers and all of those sorts of elements. So hope that answers your question to a certain extent about how that decision gets made about the right type of provision. In the sufficiency strategy, we do outline how we try and find the right home for the right young person.
Yes?
So just to clarify though, approving all of, because there's 3 separate ones in there, approving all of those does not mean that we are more likely to put a child one way or the other from foster to children's care, no?
No. No, but it's more likely that we would be able to place a young person more close to home. So just for a bit of context, and it's really interesting that you talked about that other local authority. As it stands in Medway, we don't have any of our own children homes. So there is one that obviously we're working on getting it up and open. So that's the Eden House, so the old vicarage up at Upnor. So I have that as a council-run children's home, which, you know, we're hoping will provide some of that sufficiency for us. But there are actually only 2 other registered children's homes currently in Medway. Lots of supported accommodation, but only 2 other children's homes.
Councillor Galvin.
Thank you, Chairman. This is nothing new. This is my beginning of my 25th year as a councillor in Medway. I had 12 years on this council as unitary authority, and I had 12 years on the old Rochester-upon-Medway Council. Going back to my Rochester-upon-Medway days, we had this issue come up at planning reasonably often. There's at least 1 or 2 in my own ward of it, and whilst one I can fully understand why local residents have grave concerns, I fully understand that, but in my experience over these 24 years, in the vast majority of cases, those fears have not been realised. In fact, I had one couple who were vociferously many years ago against a home, funny enough, not too far away from this in Strood. And I bumped into them many years later, and they apologised because they had to admit that it hadn't turned out as badly as they thought. So whilst we understand this, and I think it is important that it's the children that have got to come first. We do not have sufficient supply of places here in Medway. We're having to send many of our own children all over the country. If you talk to the children themselves, they don't want to live in big homes. They want to be seen as part of the community. They want to be as normal as it possibly can be. And having children placed in family accommodation, to me, is the right way. And we're having a couple of carers with them. That is about as near as a family arrangement you can possibly get. I've never forgotten a visit a few years ago to the old Vic when we were running it, and I asked one of the young residents, I think she was about 15 or 16, how she found living in the old Vic. And her reply was, well, it's like living in an office. And looking around the place, you could see that at that time. It was institutional. And kids do not want to live in an institution. They would like to live in a home. So I think this type of family accommodation within residential areas is the proper solution. Yes, there will be problems. We won't get away from that. But it's up to our team at the social workers to ensure that those things are ironed out and we've got these places properly managed. But to me, whilst I understand the fears of local residents, and I do understand it, but as I say, from my long experience, those fears have almost never been realised. And I would urge colleagues to look upon these applications sympathetically, please.
Councillor Galvin and I go back a very long time, so I can go equally say that we were considering applications on Rochester, one just the end of my road. But the difference is, that was a district, and we didn't have 2 hats. And the difference now is the fact that we have a large number of them coming forward. So I want to make it so this committee needs to be confident in the way they're going forward. Rich.
Thank you, Chairman, and I fully support everything that Councillor Scott has said. This is a totally unsuitable place for these young people. Once again, it gives me great concern. This is a retrospective application, and so they're obviously already doing it. I know that we're not supposed to refer to the two hats of being a corporate parent, but we also have a duty of care, and when being told quite categorically this is for Medway children. A number of us, of councillors, have been here for some time, and we are fully aware that we have the vicarage, which has been referred to this evening as ongoing. Well, it's been ongoing now for a number of years, and it has every single amenity that has just been described for tonight. It has the rooms, it has the chill out, it has the areas to allow young people to move on to later in life. So I think it's pretty appalling, quite honestly, that as a council, and even the previous administration of which I was part of, that we have not provided this accommodation prior to now. So I would desperately say to people to reject these applications and the other two. I'm fully aware in the second one that's coming forward, the two ward councillors have also voiced their objections. So I think it's just totally inappropriate, not just for the residents that live there, but for the children you're going to put there. I noticed that Dave referred to the policy H9, was it H8? But it says very clearly in the report, these children need one-to-one care. Now, how can you let somebody have one-to-one care and let them go wandering off the streets on their own? So that policy doesn't make any sense whatsoever to adhere to. And then finally, in terms of this particular area, unfortunately, I am one of the 3 ward councillors that look after this area, and we are sometimes plagued with antisocial behaviour, drug dealing and drug taking in that area. And therefore, to introduce vulnerable children that are in care into an area like that, you know, it seems to me to be absolutely ludicrous. Thank you.
Hello, Chair. Can I just ask the question in terms of how do we locally assess the standard of the private sector care provider? How do we make sure that sufficient safeguards are undertaken, and how do we make sure that, obviously, we have referred to split hats, but how do we make sure that in this type of facility being provided, that the children, if we have concerns about the standards of care, how we as a corporate body can feed into that and ensure that we have the right standards achieved for them?
Okay, so Mr. Holman, just before you say that, just to remind people, this is a planning consideration, though, that Mr. Holman's here to take those questions. Thank you.
Chairman, just before Mr. Harman responds, I understand totally the question from Councillor Field. The provider, in a planning, with your planning hat on, is a planning committee. The provider is irrelevant because if you approve this, you're not approving the provider. You're approving that property in that location. From a planning point of view, if approved, it could be provided, and then a year down the line, a different provider come forward. So the controls over that provider are not through planning, and that's where Mr. Harman will explain that.
Yeah, so the quick answer is for supported accommodation that don't currently come under any Ofsted regulations. If we place a young person in it, regardless whether they're in Medway or London or wherever else they are, we will do an independent quality assurance visit, which is an 80-point check from a council perspective that looks at everything from what food is available in the freezer to the state of the fire doors and regulations, DBS checks, all those sorts of things. So we're really robust on that. With regards to the Ofsted ones, then if they're Ofsted registered, more responsibility then comes to Ofsted because obviously they're the formal regulator. We will step in if something gets flagged to us, a particular issue. We have a weekly log that goes round to the senior children's services management team that says, actually, here's a list of embargo providers, for example. Here's a list of things that have been reported, LADO incidents, all of those sorts of things. So we have got quite a robust overview of those. What we don't have an overview of is those that we don't have children placed in that might be in our area. That they're ones that are effectively we don't have any rights to be able to go in there and kind of check for standards. That would be down to the placing local authority rather than us as the local authority.
I think it's useful to have this debate at this time, so if it will be useful for us as we consider applications going forward. Councillor Anaj.
Thank you, Chair. On page 27, it reads the proposal will make provision for a maximum of 2 children, stroke young people. And it goes on to say that, for example, if there is a change with the person who is living in that accommodation, then there might be a need for the dwelling to change also. So what I want to ask is that, so if in case a planning permission is given for 2 people, and maybe later within maybe a year or 2, the residents change, and there is a need for the building or another alteration within the building to accommodate the new resident, will it come to another planning permission again?
I think the answer is yes to that, Mr. Harris.
Chairman, yes, it would be, because they wouldn't be complying with the condition, so it would require an application to change that condition or a new planning permission, yes.
Thank you very much. I feel as though I'm being pulled in different directions on this one. Certainly, I think there's a case for a discussion on the other committee, which Councillor Halcroft Scott and I and other councillors who have spoken sit on, the Children's and Young People Overview and Scrutiny, and we could discuss some of these wider issues, perhaps including out-of-borough placements. But insofar as the planning application is concerned, I need to be clear on a couple of things. Because, you know, if we were to turn this down, there'd be issue of a potential appeal. So a couple of questions. First of all, can I confirm that even though the application is retrospective, which like Councillor Etheridge, I don't like too much, but even though it's retrospective, can I just clarify that we still have to consider it on its merits as though it were a new application, as though it were an original application? And the second question is, things might have got slightly confused because we've had a presentation from Children's Services affecting the wider issue that I spoke about earlier. But surely we are considering each of these 3 applications separately on their merits. Councillor Etheridge made a comment that he implored members to reject the other 2 as well. I hope and believe he's not predetermining the other 2 applications, and we are going to discuss those on their merits. Things may have got confused because of the presentation from Children's Services being a general one, but in terms of the planning applications, we're dealing with this on its merits on planning grounds, and the fact that it's retrospective makes no difference to our consideration. And if I can have that confirmed, Chair, thanks.
Absolutely, Chairman. The Councillor Jones is absolutely right. The fact that it's retrospective is irrelevant. You're considering it as effectively on its merits. So you can't turn something down just because it's retrospective.
Thank you, Chair. I am heightened by the 80-point check. Could I just have some clarification around that, please? I wondered if that is an announced check. So if I was running this children's establishment, would you make an appointment with me? Or do you have the capacity to turn up ad hoc when I'm, you know, when I maybe not, you know, haven't got my best silver out, if you like? And also, I just would like to say, it's probably thinking out loud, I think I would be more sympathetic if I could be assured that Medway children are going to be the victors of living in this kind of accommodation. But knowing, you know, I've been a foster carer for a very long time, that actually what seems to be happening is because there is a shortage of foster carers, corporate business are coming in, like supply agencies, like consultancy, and taking a really big fat chunk off. And you know, if it's a child with sexual exploitation and needs to be out of Bedford. Oh, we've got this house in Medway. Well, then we've got the drain, which is a planning issue, on every service that we've got. You know, the hospitals, the schools, you know, GP surgeries, dentists, everything else. And also we have possibly additional drains on the youth justice system. Now, we are in power at the moment, but we were in opposition, and it breaks my heart that the vicarage shut down. It wasn't my decision. In fact, I know I had some backing from the opposition, who are in the opposition now, the Tory group, because we had just got an inadequate for social care. We had an outstanding children's home in the vicarage, and it closed down. And all that outstanding professionalism and staff and the things that made it outstanding, as judged by Ofsted, has gone. And, you know, we want the Eden to be open, but it's just going on and on and on. And, you know, I've had placements from the vicarage. I'd had a child who had been in 5 foster homes and was deemed in needing being in a children's home, but they rehabilitated him, and I took a chance on him, and you know, he thrived. And I know one box doesn't fit all, but it's just the drain of the infrastructure which is lacking at the moment. I mean, there's a there's a gas problem in Station Road in Strood. The whole of that area where this home is gridlocked because of one little infrastructure problem. And I don't think we have the resources to have additional children with complex needs draining what is a resource for Medway children.
Okay, I'm going to move towards the vote. As the practice last time round, I'm going to ask the Vice Chair to move the recommendations as laid out, and we'll see where we are. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I move the recommendation to approve the application subject to conditions 1 and 2.
Seconded.
Those in favour of the recommendation?
That's 7, Chairman.
7. Those against?
That's 6, Chairman.
The application is approved. Thank you. I think it's been a worthwhile debate. So I'll move on to the next item, which is item 6. And after Mr. Harris has given his introduction, Councillor Osborne will be speaking as a ward member with your approval. Mr. Harris.
Chairman, thank you very much. Firstly, draw members' attention to the supplementary agenda advice, where you'll see that Head of Children's Services Commissioning has emailed to advise that the applicant has not been in contact with them in this instance, and as a result, at this moment in time, they're unable to either support or object to the application. As Councillor Jones quite rightly said, every application should be treated individually on its merits. And each of these application sites is different from the last one. So this application relates to this property here, which is a terrace property. So you've got Rochester Maidstone Road just here with a cemetery, and you've got St William's Way just there, and this is the area in between. It's a cul-de-sac, and that's the property just there. So you can see from the photographs that's the property. You can see how it fits in with the street scene. existing elevations and proposed elevations. So the changes here are in terms of the steps and ramp down, and the ramp down to the rear garden as well, and then the additional pedestrian access just there. Now, members, you will be aware from your report that there was a previous application that was refused in June 2022. The reasons for that refusal related to the size of the bedrooms, and in particular, this bedroom here, which is below our standards. So although this was an existing property, we had concerns regarding the size of that accommodation and the internal amenity for the children likely to be accommodated here. As a result of that, the applicants have submitted an amended plan which shows these internal changes to ensure that all the bedrooms are of a sufficient size. We're also recommending the condition 3, that the number of residents cared for or residing at the premises shall not exceed 4 at any time. And as the report sets out, that the proposal is for 2 young people to be cared for here, but with 24-hour care, and the 2 live-in carers will reside at the property on a shift basis. Now, members, this consideration is the same as previously, the policy H8 and the considerations there. We're satisfied that the changes proposed address the amenity issue for the prospective residents, and they have the garden as well. So it addresses the sole reason for refusing that previous application. As advised previously with the last application, we do not consider in planning terms that the use of this property for these 2 young people with their carers will cause any further disturbance or impact on the street scene greater than what could be delivered by a single family accommodation here. Finally, that brings us on to car parking. And there is no off-street car parking here. It's all on-street. But again, does this change from what could be the existing situation here? There are 2 carers. They could possibly both be driving. The children who will be cared here will not drive. So there's a possibility of 2 cars. A 3-bedroom property in normal family accommodation could generate a greater demand than 2 cars. So therefore, we do not consider that there are any highway car parking objections to this application. On that basis, Chairman, we're recommending approval to this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it your consideration to allow Councillor Osborne to speak as ward member? Excellent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
You have 5 minutes.
Fantastic.
I've learned how to use my timer today, so.
Excellent. So I'm here also on behalf of Councillor Edward and Councillor Murray. And can I say from the outset that I acknowledge the comments by the Children's Services team in relation to the material need for children homes in Medway. I share that concern as a corporate parent of this administration. And absolutely, we need to be considering all of these on their independent merit. And that is the reason why I'm sat here today. As is the case, this is an application that has been considered previously, and as has previously been discussed by Dave Harris, the officer, it was rejected on the basis that there was a material concern around the size of the accommodation. I'm going to be citing a number of reasons why I'm rejecting that. Similar, and I'm going to be specific on policy BNE2, which is amenity provision, and also on H8 section 5, which specifically links to insufficient parking for staff, visitors, and also taking into account access to public transport. And my provision in relation to that comes from also agency support, such as Kent Police, who've indicated that the building facility itself will need to be amended to accommodate support vehicles, which again, we need to take into account in relation to this proposal. It is the concern, and I will note, there are 19 objectors in the local residents. And in addition to that, the local school, which is located directly in its opposite, and the head teacher has raised significant concerns, and the head teacher's concerns also link to that exact point of objection that I raised, which is H8 section 5, around parking. This is a very Edwardian streetscape. It is a very narrow street. It is in fact a street that's been considered for the school streets programme because of a lack of parking at particular moments of the day. And that has potentially not been added or considered within this planning proposal because the application might have been made prior to that. So we absolutely know as an administration and as a council that this streetscape it has significant parking problems already, such that it warrants a school street proposal by this council itself. So I would argue that that itself is a material difference and actually constitutes a concern of parking above that which you would find on perhaps other applications because of the consideration of school streets in situ. In addition to that, there is still a concern I have about the site itself, and I appreciate you've raised support for the location. But if we look at the building on photographs, it is an extremely small building, and I would ask that you have a look. Located snugly between two others. It is insufficient from a privacy perspective, and whilst the rooms themselves absolutely do conform to our standards, they are right on the minimum end of those standards. In addition to that, there is concern in the community, and again with the corporate parenting hat on, and whilst that is not of material concern to this planning committee, it is of concern to members. It must be noted that these types of provision could include young people from ages 8 to 18. So this is not necessarily on the younger spectrum who may have emotional and behavioural difficulties. So there is a contextual safeguarding issue here around the proximity to local schools. And specifically local primary schools. And there are also concerns around, similar to previous applications, but this is exactly the same, around antisocial behaviour and other aspects, which have again been raised by the head teacher at the local school. Just lastly, I just want to direct members concerned to the Kent Police. They've responded to this under Section 17 of the Crime and Disorder Act, and they have listed several concerns that would need to be addressed around a lack of CCTV provision by the applicant, the requirement for additional lighting, which would have material impact potentially on neighbours, which have not been addressed within the application. The strengthening of doors, which implies that there would need to be material changes. And also they've suggested that the current site boundary is insufficient with issues of accessibility on site, which suggests again that there would need to be amendments to the above site, which is already snugly contained. And that provision then links back to my final point around the chairman's comment at the start around Ofsted. Ofsted have been really clear that all of, when submitting applications, all things need to be in place prior to an application. This application, it is very clear from the Kent Police's own assessment that they are lacking in several areas. And in my view, the parking, despite the recommendation by officers, is insufficient. It is not dedicated support. It is insufficient for support vehicles if needed. The addition of now a school streets programme or project on that street indicates a severe lack of parking. And on that basis, I would implore members to reject this application. Thank you.
Mr. Harris, do you want to make comment upon the ward members' comments?
Not at this time, Chairman.
Okay.
Happy to have the debate.
Open up to members. Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chairman. Just for a note of clarification, I wasn't prejudging this application or the one after it. I was just referring to the fact that it says very clearly within the papers that 2 ward councillors were objecting to this, and that's the only thing I referred to. Thank you.
Councillor Govan.
Yes, we seem to be treating these completely differently as we would any other planning application, because we're not talking about tearaways, we're not talking about people in the criminal justice system, we're talking about children and providing homes for children. Yes, I will admit from what I've said that looked after children are more vulnerable and they are more likely than the average child to be dragged into the criminal justice system if they're not given the right care and love and attention. But we shouldn't predetermine that because a looked after child is going to be placed anywhere in that in a community, that they are going to behave like that. They may behave like that, but so could any other child that is living in the community. And as for the parking issue, I would actually say this scheme is actually less likely to cause congestion, because this is a family home that could have had 2 parents in and 2 teenage or older siblings in the building. So you could actually have had 4 vehicles attached to the one family home. Certainly in my ward, it's not unusual to have 4 or even 5 vehicles attached to a standard sized family home. So the fact that the children will be too young to drive actually preserves for the future a less likelihood of more on-street parking, as there'll only be the 2 cars there for the carers. So it does concern me that we seem to be piling on excuses why we shouldn't provide homes for our young people. And I must confess, Chair, I struggle with that a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mendoccaris.
Right, so I know that obviously we're wearing planning hats and we're addressing them all on their separate merits, but I'm just a bit, I feel like we set a precedent. If we approve any of these, we set a precedent for small family homes being used as children homes. And I wonder if someone can assure that you can give the same level of care and attention through something like that, where it's just one staff member in a bedroom throughout, rather than a home that can look after 20 children and have kind of, I don't know, just which would be the better way around, like.
So, yeah, should say we're not setting precedents because we actually have considered applications like this already prior to the election. This is why this is kicked into this new committee as well, about concerns we had generally about the number of properties coming forward. So, Mr. Harmon, do you want to mention, just come back?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Corporately and nationally, in fact, there's a move away from the really large children's homes of the past. That's not, I don't think, conducive to good care for young people. I will take this back to the individual needs of each young person. For example, Eden House that we were talking about earlier, we're probably looking at maybe 5 young people to be living there. We think that's probably about right. I know previously it's had up to about 8, but we feel that was maybe too many. It is outlined in the sufficiency strategy for the council that we do need small children's homes, because some young people are quite hard to match with each other because of their needs and those sorts of things. So there is a need locally for 1 and 2 bedroom children's homes. That does mean that they are quite costly to the council. There's no getting away from that, because of economies of scale that says for each of those you need a registered manager and you need a deputy manager and all of those sorts of things. But we're aware of that, and it has to be needs-led for the young people. So there's not a definitive answer for that, but certainly we are moving away from times of the past where you might have had a children's home with 15, 20 young people in it. That is not, absolutely not corporately where we would like to be. So I think anywhere between sort of 1 and 6 is broadly what we'd be looking at. But as I say, I do take it back to what the needs of that individual child is, how they interact with each other, the different age ranges, the gender splits, all of those sorts of things.
Sorry, just to say, will these be staffed by Medway staff members? So we won't necessarily have oversight over who is running these. Okay.
Can Mr. Harris come in?
Sorry, Chairman, I just wanted to make an additional comment, because Councillor made I've fallen over. Made a good comment. One of the reasons we consult with James's team is if there was to come back with a comment that if we take this terrace, that 4 of the properties were already in care accommodation, then we would probably have concerns from a planning point of view in terms of an over provision in that particular terrace or in that particular street. So it is a consideration. In this instance, this is 1 property in a terrace, so we're satisfied on that.
Okay. Madam Mr Mayor, Councillor Gurang, you've...
Good evening and thank you, Chair. I just have a number of questions actually, and we have been reassured by James Harmon, Head of Children's Services Commissioning, that there are adequate quality assurance checks, and that he assures us that there is good quality and high standards of provision in these homes for our young people, and that they rightly deserve, and we as corporate parents in Medway expect for our children and young people. Could you kindly confirm whether, I have three questions actually, if these are solely for Medway children, and what is the minimum number of years that the plan will be applicable for if it is permitted, and what will happen to the service or our young people if we were to reject planning application, considering this is a retrospective planning application?
Chairman, if I could come in that, thank you for inviting me to respond to that. In planning terms, the provider is, who the provider is not a planning issue, so I cannot give any guarantee that these will be housing Medway children. From a planning point of view, we can't control that. In terms of how many years, again, from a planning point of view, once it is implemented, from a planning point of view, it could be there for forever. The controls on that may be separate through Ofsted in terms of how that care is provided. I mean, James might be able to provide on that, but comment on that. But from a planning consideration, you can't control the provider and you can't control the number of years.
Mr Home?
Yeah, so I echo Dave's comments on that. So I would love to say some of these would be reserved for Medway young people, but as I say, I don't believe that's within the gift of planning, as Dave said. With regards to the quality of provision, it's always hard to tell. Obviously, we know some of these providers who've provided other sort of properties either in and around Kent, so we have some sort of local intelligence, but clearly, again, we can't use that intelligence within this sort of forum. Ofsted do have the power to deregulate settings, so clearly if they go in and they'll do their annual visits and unannounced and all of those sorts of things, so they would absolutely have the power to close that provider down if they felt that it wasn't appropriate, or at least put restrictions on it. So that would impact it, and that would effectively stop anybody trading, for want of a better word, as a children's home under those remits. So that's the safeguard if they're going through the Ofsted registration route.
Sorry, please answer my last question as well, please. What will happen if we were to reject the planning application, but the service users and the service is already there?
This is not a retrospective application. The last one was a retrospective.
Thank you.
Sorry, yeah, the last one was a retrospective application. If you had refused that, you're effectively authorising us to take enforcement action. However, they've got the right of appeal, and we wouldn't take enforcement action while they're at appeal.
Thank you, Chair. I am troubled and concerned again about the size of this property. You know, again, from my fostering background, which I know isn't planning, but actually, if you've got, you know, 24-hour care for two young people or children, you are going to probably have 4 to 6 adults coming and going. So I think we, as planning, should be concerned about 18 objection letters. You know, being a former head teacher myself, heads do not write letters to planning unless they are troubled and concerned, and because they just don't have the time. And also, you know, so there must be genuine concerns. And although this isn't a planning in retrospect, it was denied before, and I can see why. Even the outdoor space is not adequate here, I feel.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you. I was about to also ask about outdoor space in terms of
the comment on page 36 about ramps being added to the property, and also aware from the picture you've got up there that it doesn't look like there is back access for emergency vehicles. So whether we'd be having vulnerable young people or young people with particular needs that might need, for example, emergency medical support, and the concern about, for example, it being a school street, that emergency vehicles perhaps couldn't even get down. And I just wondered if that was a health and safety concern we should be considering, but happy to take advice on that. Thank you.
Chairman, in terms of the ramp down, that is because of how obviously because of the way that the garden slopes down. But our view is that if that garden is sufficient for a family home, which it is, it's sufficient for 2 children in care, and the ramp down just provides an extra assistance for them. In terms of no, there is no rear access here that I can see on this aerial photograph. So all the access would be through the front. I don't think we could substantiate a planning reason for refusal on the basis of the narrowness of the street. Why is that different for a care home as opposed to a normal residential property?
Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm a little bit concerned about the issues which Councillor Osborne made with regard to representations from Kent Police. I'm struggling to find in this report that we would have consulted the police. I know that the police view is sought on designs of new builds and that sort of thing. A, would we have consulted the police in this case? And B, has Mr Harris seen any representations from the police? Because Councillor Osborne was quoting from a document which I certainly haven't seen.
Chairman, that's a good question. Certainly from our perspective, the member requirement recently has been, could we consult not only Children's Services but also the police on applications. Now I'm sure that Councillor Osborne was looking online and picked up a comment from the police, and I'm sure that's what he was quoting from. It's not in the report, you quite rightly say, Councillor Jones. If members are listening to what Councillor Osborne has said, if members are minded to approve this, you can always impose an additional condition which requires the applicants to engage with the police and to put any additional measures in place, like CCTV, fencing, etc. They wouldn't be reasons to refuse the application, but there could be additional measures which would satisfy the police.
Councillor Lammers.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really quite torn on this application. I don't object at all to the principle that residential dwellings can become care homes. In fact, my mum's bread and butter at the moment is actually doing some evening shifts, but mainly night shifts in residential care homes for people with special needs and so on. The thing that I have issue with is whether or not a terraced house in this residential setting is the right environment for that facility to take place. With regards to the access to emergency vehicles and stuff, the experience of my mother is essentially most of the time the kids are fine, they don't cause any additional distress, but they will have severe additional needs, and out of the blue they'll have to call an ambulance for a life and death situation if they have special needs and care needs and things like that. And it's very, very common for these residential care homes to have an ambulance call out at least once a week. It's very common, and I'm not sure if I was living next door, I would want to have that. If it was sort of like a retired country manor house, for example, or like a big detached property that has a long driveway that's sort of out of the way, I think they're perfect for this kind of setup. I'm not very comfortable with the idea of it being on a terrace house in that context. But the reason why I'm struggling, Dave, is because I'm trying to see from a planning perspective how I might might vocalise that in a term that would be permissible to deny permission. I'm not sure it is. So I'd seek your guidance on that, please.
Mr. Harris?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's an understandable conundrum. We have a similar discussion regarding HMOs in streets, where we have previously run arguments that an HMO will get more comings and goings, greater disturbance to residential properties next door and terrace properties and so on. We have run those arguments at appeal. We've lost every time. I would say two things to your comments, Councillor Lammas, and I understand all your concerns. I think first of all, the points that Councillor Golvin has made, backed up by Mr. Harman, in terms of we're trying to provide these children with as normal family accommodation as we possibly can. So these small homes, so they feel that they're part of a small family. So terraced homes have as much a role to play as possibly larger homes. I mean, this committee considered one not long ago out on the Isle of Grain, which was entirely appropriate for some children. It would help those children being in a quieter environment. It may well be here that the children homes here will because they are living close to other families, will respond quite positively to that. The final thing I would just say is there's no reason. I don't think it's defendable for us to say that two children in a home would cause more disturbance than two children in a normal family situation.
Councillor Cook, then I'll pull the debate to an end.
Yeah, I found the bit I wish I'd found earlier, and just to back up what Councillor Lammas was saying there. On page 32, I believe it talks specifically about incorporating front and rear changes to facilitate disabled access, the future provision of children who suffer from emotional behaviour disorders and also are physically disabled. I think that's where I got that question from about the ramp. And I think that's where the concerns come about this not just being children, but this being children with very particular needs. And that's what I want to be sure about in terms of that access question and the medical and the need to call ambulances and that kind of thing. So just understanding.
Yeah, and it's all the questions and debate the members are having are really good, and it is trying to get that difference between what we can control in the planning compared to what's controllable by Ofsted or elsewhere. And I think here what the applicant is saying is that it's possible that they may at some point in time look to have children who may suffer from emotional or behavioural disorders or are physically disabled, so they're making that provision for them in the possibility that they may have those. And that's the bit which requires planning permission, i.e. the ramp part. I think in terms of whether this is an appropriate location for children with those emotional behavioural disorders is not something for planning. That would be more something for Ofsted and for children's services. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I want to back up what Councillor Cook said, really, because if you have additional complex needs, although it may not be a planning issue, it actually, in essence, is a human rights issue and should be a planning issue, because you're going to need something for maybe a sensory circuit or some soft play or some therapeutic stuff. And you're 2 up, 2 down, which essentially that is. And, I've got mobility issues. I've moved from something like that because it's not adequate for my needs, and I soldier on as best I can. So children sometimes, are not going to be able to flourish in that environment. And surely that we can't have all the Equalities Act covered in size of doors, fire, staff, because it's baby's you, isn't it? It's very tiny.
Councillor Emmers?
Thank you, Chair. I'm very grateful. So I think you might have hit the nail on the head. I just want clarity. So in my mind, there's a very big difference between accommodation for children with supported living, who are basically kids who, for whatever reason, don't live with their parents anymore, but they're generally okay, and they have people come and go and help them, support them living. I have that in my ward. I've experienced with that in the past through my mum's work, so I understand that very clearly. That I wouldn't have a problem with. Children with acute needs will definitely need to have lots of ambulance calls up. They're the ones that need the homes in more sort of areas which are a bit further away, different provision. But are you saying, Dave Harris, that in a sense that Ofsted, they won't, by approving this planning permission, we won't just give it a green light to being for high needs care children. It will then be assessed by Ofsted independently, and they will then say, okay, this has been approved to be in a care home, but actually, according to us, Ofsted, this can only be for supported living or people up to this certain level of need. You can't do the full sort of like severe special needs kids route in there. Is that what you're saying in a sense?
You're getting to the point I was going to ask, because unlike the previous application, which is retrospective, this is when we give it to the planning permission. Let's say we do give it planning permission. Then what is the next steps for it to become a care home? So, yeah, so that's what I'm saying. How quickly does it move from a planning to actually an approved care home?
So the Ofsted process it takes some time. So the first thing that they'd need to do would be to appoint a registered manager. That manager will need a certain amount of experience in working in the sector, whether that's residential children's care or potentially adults care. So they will need to nominate that. They can't apply to Ofsted until they've got a registered manager. At that point, they're able to start the application form to Ofsted. They'll have to come up with what's called a statement of purpose, which will pick up some of the things that members have just discussed, which will really define what sort of young people, how many bedrooms it's going to be, what level of need they've got. So you could have, having a home for emotional, behavioural difficulties. You could have a home for young people with autism, for example. Lots of different categorisation within that. You could have a really narrow age bracket. You could have a wide age bracket. So a lot of that comes down to the individual provider in doing that. They will submit that to Ofsted. Ofsted will do the due diligence on the registered managers to make sure they're fit for purpose, and then obviously they'll schedule in the inspection and all of those sorts of things. Usually it takes about 9 months at the moment from that point of a registered manager coming in to actually Ofsted going in and doing the visit where they say, yep, you're good to go, we're going to licence you or not. Ofsted can come back with a series of kind of improvements, so they might come back and say, we're not going to do it now, but you need to go away and think of these things. There'll be everything. They're very, very detailed in what they do. So your comment about fire doors, absolutely top of the list. Where they're, does it need cameras? Are they in the right place? What are children's bedroom sizes? Are there any ligature points throughout the house? It's very, very thorough. So the one thing you do get with an Ofsted registration is a really, really independent, thorough inspection of that property, and obviously the regular visits. But sort of to address the original point is probably 6 months would be the very, very quickest they could go to get there. 9 months potentially is the average length. That's not to say they can't place young people in there in the meantime, but if they're not approved by Ofsted, then they can't have children there. So you could have children placed there whilst they're going through the process, but if they don't meet that Ofsted criteria, they obviously can't have children there.
Thank you, Chair. So, will it be coming back to the planning committee? Now, when Ofsted came, they did not meet the criteria, because if planning committee should approve, and then it goes and that accommodation does not meet the requisite standard, what then is going to happen? Because we've approved of it, and then Horsted goes in and they say, look, this building or this particular structure is not fit for housing people.
Interesting.
Chairman, thank you, and I'll be, if I get this wrong, Mr. Harmon, please correct me. It's similar to a lot of other processes. You've got to get all the necessary consents in place in order to carry out things. So, for instance, with licensing they would require planning permission. They also require licensing. If they might get planning permission, get turned down by licensing, they can't operate. And that's the same here. Just if we grant planning permission, we're assessing on its planning merits. If it then goes to Ofsted and Ofsted reject it or require further improvements, they've got to do that irrespective of planning.
Okay. I'm going to move to the Vice Chair. Prior to going to the Vice Chair, I'm going to ask, there was, Mr. Harris talked about a condition relating to the police in the matter that was raised by Councillor Osborne. Do you want to give voice to that?
Chairman, thank you very much. If members are minded to approve this, we can impose an additional condition which requires the applicant to be cognizant of the comments from the police and to submit further information to us as to how they're going to address those extra matters in relation to CCTV, fencing, and so on, and we will consider those pursuant to that condition. I'm reassured also by the comments that Mr. Harmon made that would be a matter for Ofsted as well.
So, with that additional piece of information, can I ask Councillor Stamp to move the recommendation?
Thank you, Chair. I move the recommendation to approve the application subject to conditions 1 to 5 and then adding in the extra condition with the applicants engaging with the police to put in any necessary safety measures.
Thank you.
Seconded, Chair.
Those in favour of the recommendation?
That's 10, Chairman.
Those against?
That's 5, Chairman.
So the item is approved. We'll move on to the next application, which is item 10. And once Mr. Harris has given his introduction, I will move to the ward councillor, which is this time Councillor Clark.
Chairman, thank you very much. Again, a very different site and a very different application. This is for a commercial residential dwelling to a children's care home. You'll see this is for 4 children, aged between 12 and 17, and there will be between 2 and 3 staff present on site at all times. This is the application property here, one half of a pair of semi-detached properties that you see just there. That's the property just in here. So you see it's got that 2-storey extension with a garage at the ground floor and this hard standing across the front just there. So that's what you can see here. Photos showing the street scene. And then the existing plans, and you'll see it's a larger property. So on the ground floor, we've got dining and living rooms, kitchen, and we've got a garage just in there. And then upstairs, we've got 5 bedrooms and a bathroom. So it's a large family home. The proposed plans, no external changes other than the garage is to be converted to an office. So that will then become a window just in there. There will be an internal separation here. So you've got a separate living area there, a study, and a separate living area there, kitchen and the room at the back there. And then upstairs, 4 bedrooms, and then the staff sleeping office and the bathroom. Again, similar considerations to the previous application in terms of policy H8. Internally, we feel that this is providing satisfactory accommodation for the children that will stay here. There's plenty of garden space for them. In terms of the amenity of adjacent residents, similar considerations to us that we do not feel that there will be greater disturbance as a result of this than there would be for a family home. In terms of parking, we've got the 2 parking spaces to the front, so that garden will need, and the driveway will need to be extended slightly to get the 2 parking spaces in there. And then we've got refuse and cycle store just in there. Chairman, we're again recommending approval for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's get my timer up. Is it agreed that Councillor Clark addresses the committee?
Thank you, Chairman. Before I start, may I ask some clarification of a question to Mr. Harman, because it will affect what I say? Is that possible?
Well, if you go forward and then we'll take the question at the end, yeah?
Okay, yeah, fair enough, ready. Okay, apologies, members. Thank you very much. I have a lot to run through. Added obviously to what you've read in the papers, our objections to this are very much to do with its location. Hurstwood is a rat run, it's a fast road. This house sits on a blind corner, has an incredibly steep driveway, which the photos don't do justice to. Road safety is a serious issue if a child be absconding or running from the premises. There are little and at times there is no on-road parking available. The driveway does not permit 2 cars to be moved at once. Once one's in, it will be completely blocked. 4 children, how many visitors is that? How many social workers? Mostly probably from out of borough. The number of people visiting that home is not in keeping with a normal house. The garden itself, again, the photos don't show. There's a very steep back garden with a clear 4-foot drop to that grassed area that you saw a picture of. Ofsted's location assessment talks about where you're building a home or planning a home put children at risk of exploitation? Is it close to criminal hotspots? Does it have accessible, available and suitable local education? This application has not considered at all the proximity of 2 supported living homes at number 14 and number 16. There are many residents who lead and have led chaotic lifestyles and are receiving help in the community, and there's a lot of anecdotal stuff from the local residents about current issues in there. H2 policy, the retention of housing, the development not to result in a net loss of existing residential accommodation. Well, we've already lost number 14 and we've lost number 16. What is the point of this policy if it's not taken cumulatively in a road? We talked earlier on the other application, Mr. Harris referred to having more than 1 type of home in a road. I appreciate supported living is slightly different from children in care, but we've already got 2 in such close proximity. Similarly, policy H8, residential institutions, only to be permitted if they do not adversely affect residential amenity, if there's sufficient parking, if the occupiers have sufficient amenity space, if the property is too large to reasonably expect its occupation by a single household. It seems to be ignored. This house is not too large to be used by a single household. There's no fire risk assessment at all. The documents are very lacking in what it has. Room sizes, technical housing standards, the 5th bedroom, I think should be a minimum of 7.5 metres squared, I believe. It does not seem to be that. Bathrooms, 2 very small ones. We're hearing about potential disabled children being used and then permitted. Again, what provision is there for that? Noise amenity is a semi-detached property. The agenda states proposal doesn't generate significant more activity than comings and goings of a single household. That's either naive or misinformed. These are 4 vulnerable teenagers in a care system. They're probably going to be a long way from home. There's no deprivation of liberty on them. There's no curfews. These children can come and go. And again, I allude to the presence of the other homes in the immediate area. This proposal doesn't seem to consider the cumulative impact at all. There's the applicant in his own Regulation 46 location assessment records 41 calls to the police from this postcode to December last year in a year. 41 calls. The postcode has 44 properties. You can obviously work out what's going on. We're talking about putting vulnerable children whom we are required to safeguard. There are no police representations on this one. Again, I don't know why that is. Why have we got it on some applications and some not? The concerns read the applicant, Ardent Residential Children's Services, company number 078 23326. Until 18th November last year, it was known as Adroit Recycling Limited. And there's still a website in that name under the same company number, which describes itself as a British company dealing in the recycling of end-of-life tyres and the production of rubber granulates. The application talks of 10 years of experience, though. There are misleading statements throughout. The design and access statement talks of only children from Chatham, prioritising children in Chatham, local specialist schools available. All untrue. Statement of purpose. The first assessment was developed in consultation with the local safeguarding board, local councillors, residents association. Untrue. These have been challenged and some of those have been taken down. The regulation 46, there are 10 sections for them to complete. Only one has been done. I showed all this stuff to Mr. Harmon. We had a meeting previous week about it, really. And you have in your supplemental agreement a statement saying they have some concerns. But Mr. Harmon had some bigger things to say about that. Looking at the application, the location assessment is not comprehensive and many sections are not completed with responses missing from many agencies. There isn't sufficient parking on site in this area where there is above average crime reports for the area, although nothing suggests this is young people. The application did include a number of incorrect references to the consultees list. Sorry, 30 seconds I've got to finish, Councillor Hubbard. Thank you much. It followed on from what Councillor Howcroft said on the first one, and when Mr. Harmer mentioned there was an 80-point inspection that we are done. Does that apply, though, if this is out of borough use?
Mr. Harmer.
The simple answer is no. And we have no rights to go in and inspect a property unless one of our young people are there, because obviously it would be the council inspecting an independent business. So if we even have one young person there, then absolutely we can go in and do visits, unannounced visits. But yeah, if we've got no young people there of our own place, no, then we don't have the rights to be able to do that, no.
Thank you, Chair. I would like Dave Harris's response, please, to some of the questions raised by the Ward Councillor in regards to gaps he perceived in application documentation and police report, please.
Yes, I would like to know, as the Ward Councillor has raised, that there are already 2 residences that are meeting social care needs in that vicinity. I'm troubled and concerned, and really concerned, that out of a road which has 40 dwellings, if we pass this, there will be 3 dwellings taken away from families in Medway, many of whom are in bed and breakfast single room accommodation. And surely we've got to say, you know, if a road has got 40 houses in it, you know, when do they stop? 46 houses, 48 houses, 40 care homes? Not a great way to do, you know, equal opportunities and, not, assimilating people into the community in which they live.
Chairman, just thinking through the 2 questions. First, in relation to the police, we have consulted the police. They have not commented on the application. So they've neither supported it or made any comments at all. In relation to the question from Councillor Howcroft-Scott, which is a good one, as always, I can't say that to you, well, the 44 houses in this, if no more than 14 were, it is a matter of fact and degree. In our view, 3 houses been taken out of single family accommodation, albeit that these children will be living to a degree as a family. I can't say that 3 homes in this street would constitute an over-provision in planning terms. Yeah, sorry.
Any other member? If not, I'm going to go to the Vice Chair. If the Vice Chair will be able to move the recommendation as laid out.
Thank you, Chair. Personally, I can't support this application because I think it's too many children in an area who could have additional needs. From experience in my ward, there's one where there's 4 teenagers living in a property and there's constant problems and issues with the property. But for the democratic purpose, I will move the recommendation to approve the application subject to conditions 1 to 4.
Seconded. With some difficulty with my microphone.
Okay. Those in favour of the recommendation?
That's 2, Chairperson.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Just a lower
Sorry,
hand.
can we put your hand right? One, two.
That's 4.
Those against?
That's 11.
Chairman, can I make a suggestion here, if it's okay, and it's obviously it's members' call what you want to do with it, but rather than going for looking for a refusal, can I ask for a deferral so that we can get further information from the applicants to answer some of the questions that Mr. Harmon's team have put forward? If members want to refuse it, then I'll need a reason for refusal. Thank you.
I think that's a good idea to go for a deferral, because the Ward Council raised a number of issues which need to be thought through, especially about the usage of other loss of accommodation in the street already. So is it agreed that we defer to the next meeting or a future meeting? Yeah, fantastic. Defer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon, for coming along. I trust you enjoyed your meeting here. Yeah. It's been a very useful debate.
Chair,
and hopefully be taken forward by the Regen ONS that Councillor Holmes chairs, and hopefully the appropriate portfolio holder will also take it forward as well, because we need to get to a point where we can feel more comfortable with making these decisions. So, moving on.
Chair, could I just have a 2-minute comfort break? I'm on a lot of medication and I need to...
You anticipated my next statement. Before we move on to item 8, comfort break. One meeting, please.
Members, thank you very much. Very grateful to the members that attended the site visit, or the visit to the site yesterday. A lot of members were there. The notes of that site meeting are set out in your supplementary agenda advice. Those members that attended, what was discussed, what was pointed out on site. Those members that went with me to 32 Moat Lane afterwards, and what was discussed and pointed out there. So I know you've had a presentation on this before, members, so I'll move through relatively quickly in relation to this. So this is the application site in here. This is the former quarry in there, which was developed in probably the late 1990s. There was, as part of that planning permission for a house in here. Wilcon Homes at that stage didn't build that house for financial reasons, i.e. they, at that point in time, they felt that if they didn't build that last house, they could get away with not paying certain Section 106 contributions. So there is actually an old planning permission for one home in there. This area in here, which is Moat Lane, that was formerly occupied by one house, and then that was developed more recently. This site here is owned by the Patman Trust and has been used up until relatively recently as for business commercial purposes for the rope company that has since moved into the dockyard occupying the building just in here. There was a previous approval, as members are aware, for that building to be demolished and for flats to be constructed at the front, a house constructed to the rear with vehicular access into a car parking area in the middle, just there. And I'll show you those plans very shortly. So this is the application site the members saw. You will be aware that there's been a lot of clearance of that site in recently, although a lot of the trees still remain along the boundary here. So some photographs, relatively recent. And then within the site, members, you walked up this boundary just there last night. And this is Galleon Way, looking from the site in there. And this is the current application. So you've got the terrace of properties fronting Upnor Road there, block of 6 flats just in here, proposing a vehicular access this time through here into this car parking area there. Now that car park will serve the flats. A pair of semi-detached properties in here with their own car parking just in there, and then a detached property here with its car parking to the front. So from Galleon Way just serves the one house as it was originally proposed way back in the 1990s. The difference between this application and the previous one relates to the fact that they've got additional land in here, which means that they can resite the flats, redesign them, and get the vehicular access through here. But that also, the second part of the proposal, is the pair of semi-detached properties just there. Councillor Galvin at the site meeting asked for a plan which set out distances from the neighbouring properties. So you'll see this is the one of the application properties, detached house here, 27 metres, or just little over 27 metres, to the back of number 32. The very edge of the proposed semi-detached property here, 16 metres to the rear of 32, and that point there is around about 50, well, just under 16, 15.74 metres to the sidewall of 32A. The additional point that I'd point out there is that 32A mainly faces this way, 32 faces this way, so it's not directly back to back where you would normally expect a 21 metre distance when you're looking at back to back, because you've got them more side on, you've got them looking that way and looking that way, so it addresses that privacy issue. This was a previously approved scheme, and you can see that triangle area of land there, which was not included in that previous application, but it is included now. The applicants have proved that that is within the applicant's control, and that's enabled them to increase the size of the site and improve the layout and design of the 6 flats and get that vehicular access in through there. And then this house here, which was probably previously a smaller house with a vehicular access through to a car parking area in here, enables that to be just one house, more commensurate with the other properties in the street, and a larger garden to serve that property. Again, this area of land here was not included in the application site. So you've got, members saw on site, you've got a fence here and a fence there. At that stage, it wasn't known whether that was in the control of the applicants. It's now been proved, and we've got the legal advice, external legal advice on this, that is within the same ownership and therefore can be included in the application site. These are the flats as proposed that you previously saw, fronting onto Upnor Road. That's the rear of them, side and the side elevations. The pair of semi-detached properties in the centre of the site, and the detached property to the end of the site fronting onto Galleon Way. Now, members, the key issue that seemed to be a matter of discussion and asked for clarification on site yesterday related to the trees within this area in here. So this is the tree survey plan. So these trees will remain untouched because they're in the garden of number 32, so they can't be touched. Then we have some sycamores through here and various other trees through here running right the way through to the front, and then some further trees just in there. Now, as originally proposed, the applicant showed those trees to the front in here to be removed, and then a number of trees at the back to be removed in there, mostly in relation to where it's close to the side wall of the proposed semi-detached properties there. Now, the applicant has confirmed this afternoon, having listened to the concerns and comments from members on site yesterday, that there is a need to reconsider what trees should be removed from the site. So they have agreed this afternoon that 4 of these sycamores, i.e. these 4 at the back here, closest to 32, and providing some outlook and amenity and view from 32, will remain, and the ones that will need to be removed are just those close to the side wall there. So there'll be 4 retained and 4 removed. So, members, the recommendation is for approval with the conditions as set out, but in light of that change to what trees can be, are to be retained, if members are minded to approve the application, I would suggest the deletion of condition 4 and a rewording of it, that prior to commencement, a detailed landscaping scheme which shows all trees to be retained and protection measures for those trees to be submitted to and approved in writing with us. The final wording to be agreed by with the chairman, the vice chairman, and the spokes. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Councillor Williams wishes to address the meeting as a ward councillor. Is that agreed? Well, I haven't started yet. You won't have 10 minutes, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, 10 minutes.
I'll hold on a second. Not even 50.
Got a race.
Okay. If you start.
Oh, right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, members. In my opinion, I think this invitation is an overdevelopment of the site, with a pair of semi-detached houses squeezed in the back of a plot, surrounded by houses and garages. Also concerned with the sight lines onto Upnor Road, due to parked vehicles and the tight bend near Ordnance Yard, where cars do come round at speed. Also think there'll be a loss of amenities to the houses in Moat Lane, in contravention of BNE2 of the Medway Local Plan 23, through the proposed proximity of the pair of semi-detached houses in the proposed application. Policy BNE2 states that all developments should secure the amenities of its future occupants and protect those amenities enjoyed by nearby and adjacent properties. The design would have to, the development have to regard to privacy, daylight, sunlight, noise, vibration, activity levels and traffic generation. I think this application does not follow this policy. In policy BNE6, parts 4 and 5, retain existing landscape features including trees and hedgerows and be well related to open space features in the locality, and to support wildlife by the creation and enhancement of semi-natural habitats and use the indigenous plant material. I do not think this application addresses these policies. The loss of mature trees in this site is unacceptable, with the arboreal report states that the trees are in good condition with fair or good structure and have a remaining contribution of 20 to 40 years. I'm still concerned on whether the trees are in the planning application's boundary and if they come under this application remit, and thus I cast doubt that they could be felled if this application is passed. At the June Planning Committee, the officer stated, and I quote, that the trees currently in situ are not within the application site. The boundary of the site location plan and the tree removal plan seems to show the trees inside the site boundary. This needs to be clarified. Outside of the site boundary, this needs to be clarified. These are mature trees and the loss is unacceptable, considering the Medway Council Climate Action Plan states they want to invest in our existing natural environment, focusing on projects that store carbon, increase chain resilience, improve air quality, and increases the presence of wildlife and plants. The destruction of mature trees on this site must go against that council policy. One of the adjacent neighbours is a beekeeper, and as we're well known, bees are an important part of our natural biodiversity. And the loss of natural habitat will impact on the bees, and this important species is in decline and must be protected wherever possible. Also, there have been numerous wildlife sighted in the area, including owls, woodpeckers, squirrels, foxes, newts, and we were impacted by the loss of these trees. The Government Environment Act 2021 developers are required to protect existing habitats and ecosystems to ensure any habitat loss is identified and mitigated, and will have a 10% biodiversity gain. This application certainly does not address that. And I would ask this committee to protect the biodiversity and environment of the local area and refuse this application, or in at least a deferral to ascertain the boundary of the site and whether trees come under the scope of this application. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chairman, and I fully concur with the statement just read out by my colleague that this is an overdevelopment of this site. However, we've now heard from Dave Harris that it appears that the applicant does have access to that boundary area and the trees. So I am more than pleased to learn that a number of those trees are going to be protected. So first of all, before I continue on, I would like some guarantee from this committee and within the summing up by the Vice Chair that those remaining trees will be protected and looked after. So it's not currently a condition within the application, and I'd like to see that as a condition, please. I suspect now, because the applicant has come forward and stated very clearly, it appears, that they do have access to that area, that this will be passed by this committee. However, that's not the only issue, I think, that is with this site. Members who attended the site visit yesterday will recall the very narrow entrance into the site. And I would like them to take into consideration that if you're coming down round that hill and you're about to turn left into that site, and another resident or number of residents are attempting to get out, that road is now gridlocked. And if something comes tearing around that corner, there's going to be a serious accident there. So I'd also like to see a review on the access to that site for residents. So besides that, there's nothing more I can say, but except with I would love to see the applicant's confirmation of that they own that strip and the legality of it. Thank you.
So as Mr. Harris said, we're going to relook at condition 4. And the wording of that will be agreed between ourselves, including the spokesman, of course, yourself. So you'll have an opportunity to make sure that the wording is as you feel fit. Councillor Mendocaris.
So I just wanted some clarity on the Section 106 funds. You said that they originally didn't build it because they thought they could get away with not paying the 106. Are they now either going to have to, or did they already in the end?
It's a different application now. Maybe I should not have said. I've said that. I'm saying that because I've been around an awful long time. But it's just it's still great to me a little bit that Wilcon Homes, who built that adjacent development, got away without paying Section 106 in relation to the property here. Wilcon Homes aren't the applicants for this one.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. I heard the local members' comments with interest, but I think that most of these points were addressed at yesterday's site meeting. Certainly I can remember the Chief Planning Officer commenting on the movement of the sun. I can also remember the highways report being satisfactory, or our being told that the highways aspects were satisfactory. After all, we're not talking a great number of dwellings exactly in terms of highway matters. And in terms also of the distances, I think Councillor Galvin was right to ask about the distances, and I think the distances are acceptable. If you just went through the tunnel from that application site to St Mary's Island, a lot of the properties are much closer together than that. And I would have thought that given the state of the land, and I'm intrigued by what Councillor Williams said about wildlife, but you know, it looked to me to be in a terrible state, that piece of land, and it could benefit, I would think, from some sort of development on it. The only wildlife that I encountered, without being too flippant, was a pigeon depositing its load on to me at the beginning of the site meeting. So, you know, I don't wish to belittle, you know, bees and what have you are very important issues. But I mean, this is a limited development. I don't think it's going to impact on highways, or at least that's the professional advice. And I think that site is also in need of development, and I think this is the right development. Moreover, so I'll be supporting the application, Chair.
Wood pigeons. Any other member? If not, I move to the Vice Chair to move the recommendations as laid out, except for condition 4, which will be amended through the normal channels later on next week.
Okay, I move the recommendation to approve the application subject to conditions 1 to 21 with the amendment of condition 4 with regards to the trees being protected. How about the review on access that Councillor Etheridge mentioned?
Chairman, in terms of the access, our highways person has looked at it. It's got the necessary visibility. Cars parked, there's no cars parked on this part. There is a parking area over the other side over here. There's no cars ever parked on this part of the road. They do park along here. There is a chicane further down this way, which does slow down cars as well coming round that bend. But in terms of visibility, the access meets our standards. The only other thing I would say is that when we considered the previous application, which had access from Galleon Way, a lot of local residents commenting on that application said they didn't like the access from Galleon Way, and why were the flats not accessed from Upnor Road, which is this application.
So if you move.
Okay, I move the recommendation to approve the application subject to conditions 1 to 21 with the amendment of condition 4 to be approved with regards to the trees being protected. Thank you.
Happy to second, Chair.
Those in favour of the recommendation?
That's 13.
Those against?
That's 2.
This planning application seeks permission for construction of a concrete products manufacturing facility comprising of a warehouse, manufacturing plant and the production and storage of distribution of concrete blocks. This is a proposed mixed use of B1 plant and warehouse and B8 storage product storage. The use is to operate 24 hours a day, and the submitted details indicates that the process would be as follows: that they would receive the aggregate from the existing adjacent aggregates handling facility, they'd import cement by road, they'd construct, and the construction and the operation of the concrete products manufacturing facility itself, incorporating a concrete batching plant alongside external storage. And then the final product, the concrete block, would be exported by road. This is the aerial site of the site in red here. Just to note other buildings of significant height in the area, the Medway power station, which is approximately 35 metres high, sorry, this one's 35 and this one's 33 metres high, and then there's other large warehouse units down on the front here, which are approximately 16 metres high. And this is just a more zoomed in version of what we just saw. Just you can see the previous development land. These are photos looking into the site, and here are those large buildings that I here's the power plant I mentioned here, and this is looking north, and this is the Uniper power station on the other side. And again, looking south, and there again, the larger buildings I've referred to. And then this is from the actual entrance from the B2001. And again, the site would be approximately here, and you can see those two buildings that I've referenced just poking out over the vegetation there. So if we move to the proposed and existing plans, you can see that the building is proposed at the rear of the site here. The aggregates will be loaded here and move through the facility. This is the floor plan. It's a technical floor plan of all the machinery and plant needed. And then go to the elevations. So the building is predominantly 10 metres high along these lines on the ridge. And then the taller units are between 16 and 20 metres tall, so they're not as tall as the larger buildings. Therefore, it's considered that in this industrial location, it would blend into that environment, and there's significant screening existing on the site. Regard to the principle of the use, the uses referred to B2 and B8 are supported by local plan in this Thamesport location, and also as part of the application it was assessed under the environmental impact assessment regulations, and an environmental statement wasn't needed and could be considered with the submitted information of the application. So with regards to just amenities, we've got distance to neighbours does not result in a significant impact, but there is a condition recommended to assist in reducing noise impact from the site. And then other issues of air quality on site have been raised. There is a report, various reports that's been amended. They indicate that it is acceptable to human health. There is a suggestion of a condition required to finalise the air quality mitigation for the 4 Elms Hill AQMA, which is recommended. Regarding to air quality, there's been objection regarding the potential of dust on the equipment and offices of neighbouring industrial uses. The air quality assessment was assessed by an independent consultant who specialises in these fields. Additional information was provided on the original assessment, which was requested, and a risk-based assessment was provided by the applicant, and it was concluded there would be negligible impact on the receptor sites, and this was accepted by the consultant, and therefore there's no objection to air quality, subject to the conditions set out in the report to make sure the mitigation in that report is followed. Highways concerns have been raised, and the transport assessment supported by the application is considered to be acceptable, and that there would be no adverse impact on traffic flows or the road safety. with regards to the site being industrial, there is potential for mobilisation of contamination, but conditions for contamination conditions are recommended, also including the restriction on piling methods to stop that, to stop the facilitation of mobilisation of contamination. SUD schemes would also prevent that into damage to the marine environment. Obviously, with the setting, the site in close proximity to the Medway estuary and marshes, SPA, triple SIs and Ramsar sites, support application being sorted by sufficient ecology information and subject to conditions regarding the securing of ecological enhancements and lighting, that there is no significant impact. And again, with the conditions recommended for contamination in SUDs, there would be no impact on the marine environment, and a habitats regulation agreement being agreed with Natural England. Therefore, the application is considered to be acceptable, subject to the conditions in the case officer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Stubbs. So is it agreed that the ward councillor, Councillor Spaulding, speak to us? Okay. 5 minutes.
I'm obliged, Mr. Chairman, and I apologise, members, but you do have paper before you. This came in as a late request from the Parish Council. Parish Council, you will have seen, have raised numerous objections, as have National Grid, Grain LNG, Thamesport Interchange and National Highways have raised concerns. Effectively, it's two: air quality and road movements. Dealing with air quality first, if you look at the first document, you will see that it refers to 3 versions of this report. Every time something comes up, they change it to suit them. Interestingly, version 2 says 16th of September 2022. However, if you go over the page to version 2, it's dated the 20th of September 22. Now, I'm a cynical person. Is it just a mistake, or is it an error and there's 4 versions and we've not seen the third? If it's just an error, how can we be sure they've been careful with the remaining items within that report? A minor point, but you will see where I go with this very, very shortly, because if we go into document 3 before you, paragraph 5.2 of all 3 versions, they've never dated, deals with air quality local monitoring of the nitrogen dioxide emissions. And you'll note 2015 to 2019. Now, this report came in 2022, and of course we've had a further one in 2023, yet they haven't updated it. Members will be aware of the continuing issues of air quality around 4 Elms Hill and the peninsula in general. And the third version basically says it doesn't contain any, and I appreciate there was lockdown, but interestingly, this council produced an air quality annual status report, which you'll see at document 4. And interestingly, the bottom line, 4 Elms Hill air quality management, level of exceeding 5237.5, level of exceeding the predefined limit. So there you go. We have up-to-date stuff telling us we're way over already without this application coming in. No current, no more recent data. Think about it, please. The second paragraph of, which is in document 5, 6.2, these consultants love ancient stuff. According to research conducted in 2003. So what? For the 5 years from 2015 to 2019, there is other data available. Where is it? Why have they not used it? I'm a suspicious sort. Now, I submit that the favourable conditions that they've come up with in these 3 or even 4 versions are unreliable and flawed because they've used aged and not up-to-date data. Now, if we go on to vehicle movements, document 6, planning statement says we're bringing the cement in by road, by tanker. Actually, it's not just a tanker, it's basically called a cement bulker. And of course, the blocks are going out by road, not by HGV, not by Amazon, Eddie Stobart, lorry and drag, wagon and drag. Big truck towing trailer. My uncle used to drive them, I'm quite familiar with them. Okay. Also, of course, cement, hazardous material, DG qualification. Used to do that in the army, whoopie-doo-dah. There's a transport assessment drafted and published same month, April 22. And if I take you over to document 7 from the planning thing, Deliveries will be coming in the bulk, 5 to 6 per day, and approximately 40 going out, approximately 39 or 45. Now, when we actually move on to document 8 and 3.42 and 3.43, it says we did automatic traffic counts between 29th of January, 4th of February 2019. 2019? Now, I know we've had lockdown. They could have done some new ones. Now, interestingly, these are flawed. My predecessor, Councillor Pendergast, ran Nags Head Pub. One of the things he did, rented rooms to contractors for lockdowns. Now, I've checked my records. It would appear there's a machinery lockdown over on the peninsula. When there's machinery breakdowns and refurbishment, less traffic goes in and out. Shutdowns, by definition, traffic flow in and out less. Therefore, this data, like the previous, is ancient, it's out of date, you can't rely on it. Since 2019, NEU Connect have arrived. New electricity interconnector to British and German electricity market, substation undersea cable. Grain LNG, new 190,000 cubic metre liquid natural gas tanker, under construction now. The masses of lorries that are coming up and down there, I know, because I've been out there. In addition to that, Murphy's are engaged in delivery of a £100 million gas compressor complex. More lorries. The transport assessment written in April 2022, there is no reason those consultants and the applicants could have got up-to-date data. Please think about that. I was going to say, you can basically,
thank you,
if you're
Councillor.
happy, like it. If not, kick it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spalding. Members. Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chairman. I think what's the most important part of the presentation by the Ward Councillor has been missed out, which is the one that we received in Rural Liaison recently, where we were told quite blatantly the up-to-date traffic figures coming through Medway do not exist, because no account has been taken into the development at Kingsnorth. No account has been taken into the offshoot from the tunnel, and no account has been taken of possible HIF traffic. And all those three figures are never being collated into one spot. So we have absolutely no idea whatsoever of the traffic expected to come through this part of the towns. Now, obviously, people may consider, well, okay, so that's just one part of the towns, but it's not true. They've also got to travel from Bluebell Hill, they've got to travel from the M2, that means they're coming through Cuxton as well. Slap bang through the middle of Strood into this area. Once again, I re-emphasise, there is no comprehensive document that shows anywhere within Kent, and I'll re-emphasise Kent, of where all this traffic is going to come through. So my colleague here has only just touched on the surface of this. Also within your papers, you'll know that National Highways are recommending that the Red Road application is turned down. They're also advocating that another application at Kingsnorth is turned down, simply because the roads are not capable of taking the existing traffic, let alone this additional burden. And if we take into account what we're talking about in terms of tankers, yeah, they are huge tankers coming in with cement, and once again, heavy-duty lorries carrying trailers, carrying concrete blocks. Thank you.
I just had a question with regards to receiving this paperwork. I thought normally there was a deadline and we couldn't receive it.
Sorry,
Just
Chairman, the reason for that, and you can blame myself, Councillor Spalding confirmed to me that if he could hand around that piece of paper and talk directly to it and point you to things, then he can keep his speech to 5 minutes. So to be fair to him, I allowed that to be handed around so he could refer directly to it, but it came from Councillor Spalding.
Okay, Chair.
Madam Mr Mayor, Councillor Gillingham.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit concerned that some of the data that's been presented before us for decision making are on the basis of what is before me and all of us seem to be quite outdated. We do need up-to-date information to help us with decision making. This is
Yes, I think the people of Medway and us councillors making this important decision, we do need up-to-date data, please.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman. From a planning perspective, I would say that the application is very heavily dependent on conditions, with further information coming down the track. And in order to make an informed decision as members, I think we need to see that information up front. A personal point, the concrete industry contributes to about 8% of emissions globally. So it's quite a polluting industry, and that's just a personal opinion, not a planning consideration. So I do think we need more information on this application before we can make an informed decision on it.
Councillor Howard-Croft. Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I am a little bit worried about the highways and the traffic, you know, because as Councillor Etheridge has said, you know, it's going to adversely affect highway safety. It's going to inconvenience most of Medway, or at least North Strood, Finsbury, you know, that rural area. And, you know, as Madam Mayor says, we haven't got up-to-date figures, which how can we make an informed decision if it's not, you know, if we're looking at different sorts of figures, and I'm a bit confused.
I was just going to confirm that obviously the information submitted, the application has been considered by the Highways Authority and also National Highways as per the representations section of the report. The information is all considered to be acceptable, subject to where they have recommended conditions such as a CMP during construction. And that information has been carefully considered, although you said that it's out of date, considered to be acceptable.
Information on this, I know, is very fluid at the moment because, you know, the Highways Authority, Highways Agency are talking about several things, including the Low Thames Crossing, talking about the A2, M2 is beyond capacity, etc. So I'm not. Lots of people are unclear about what the capacity really is in the whole of this part of Medway. Who wants to come? Oh, Councillor Galvin.
This has been a site of heavy industry probably for the last 70 years or more. It's the whole site originally was the BP oil refinery. Then we had the power station built. We've got the LNG terminal. As the board member said, it's also now become a real energy hub with not only gas supplies going both in and out of the country, but the electrical connectors as well. So this has been a highly industrial site for many, many years. At this committee, we spend most of our time talking about residential properties and retail shops. But just as importantly as providing homes for people, there's a necessity to provide employment. This is a well-established employment site. It will all employment sites will involve traffic generations. We have to accept that. So we have to either decide, do we want employment and the traffic that goes with it, or we don't have the employment and we can enjoy less traffic. That's the clear decision we've got to make. So either we are pro-jobs or we're not. So on that basis, that's how we will have to make up our minds this evening.
Mr. Harris.
Chairman, thank you very much. There is an awful lot of work being done in relation to the local plan on highway aspects. And there's lots of discussions going on at the moment with National Highways regarding Junction 1 of the M2. And lots of discussions with another arm of National Highways regarding the LTC and the implications of that. But in relation to the evolving work, I'm just picking up on the points that Councillor Galvin very kindly has made. Grain is our largest employment designated in the local plan. In our adopted local plan, grain is an employment area. National Grid have an employment permission, which they've started to implement, but will take some time to come forward. With that comes significant traffic generation. But they've only implemented a fraction of that, which National Highways and our highways people are happy with, and that's approved. In relation to the comments being made in relation to Noi Connect and LNG and the construction traffic for them, absolutely, there is construction traffic, but they are power generating. Noi Connect, it's an interconnector with abroad. LNG is a power generation. When it's up and operational, the traffic on those roads would significantly reduce because that construction traffic is no longer there. National Highways have put in holding objections to Redrow application and to Berkeley Modular at Kings North. They're holding objections because they want to assess that impact in relation to Junction 1 of the M2. That's ongoing work. There is some capacity at that junction at the moment, and it's considering each application on its merits coming forward. As I said, our highway people and National Highways have looked very carefully at the transport information submitted with this application, recognising that it's an allocated employment site. And both the Local Highways Authority and National Highways are happy with this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Just to make comments that when I moved to the Medway towns, Thamesport was started to be operational, and it was a very busy container port, lots of containers going up and down, and adequate to wait at the time. Smack into what is Strood North nowadays. Thamesport doesn't operate as a container port anymore ever since the Thames Gateway opened, and the level of traffic from Grain down into the High Hurstwood down to Who has reduced that heavy traffic. So we must be aware of that. So as the road was upgraded to a higher level, and now it's actually operating at a lower level. Councillor Cook.
It might be a question we can't answer, but I want to just ask whether there's any idea of measuring environmental impact between production materials, concrete blocks being made locally and being available for the work that needs to happen across Medway, and the amount of work that would need to be, shipped in, of lorries that would need to come to provide those building materials for the work that's going to happen, and whether there's any kind of cost benefit from having things produced locally rather than things being needed to be transported into Medway.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Really, really good question. Thank you. I'm not sure I've got the full answer. Can I just ask for a clarification? Are you asking if things are manufactured locally and they're used locally, that compared to being taken outside? I think the advantage of grain is it gives options in terms of transport. I know that there are companies out there and in Medway who manufacture things which are then used relatively close by up in London and so on. Some of that's transported by road, some of it's transported by boat. I think the point that Councillor Galvin made was a good one, which is the concrete batching. There will be local businesses that will be using that because concrete is for a building business. and there's lots of buildings going on in North Kent, not just in Medway. Hopefully that helps. It's not a full answer for you, Councillor Cook, because I haven't got that full answer.
I'm just wondering that if the developers are listening to our deliberations, not that it's a strictly planning matter, but they may offer Medway businesses favourable terms for the concrete that is available locally.
Councillor Haycroft-Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Are there any way that we could put some conditions on the haulage? For instance, you know, to avoid precious times, which are like from 4 and 7 in the evening and from 7 till 9 in the morning, you know, so if we're a child-friendly Medway, it makes it safer for our children. Also, what I've noticed, you know, working in London, it really has made an impact having buses using hydrogen. It's much cleaner, it's much quieter. And also, you know, can we not put stipulations on that as far as possible use shipping or other transport links?
Chairman, Chairman, really good questions again. So thank you, Councillor Haycroft-Scott. Number of questions there. It's certainly in terms of the operation and the times of movement. We can impose an additional condition which requires them to submit further information to us in terms of those hours of movement, and that way we can work with them to get the movement within those non-peak times. So we can impose a condition to that effect. In relation to hydrogen buses, understand exactly where you're coming from. I don't think we can control it on this scheme, but certainly there are ongoing discussions with a lot of the employment, for instance, out at Kingsnorth, where we're trying to get minibuses, we're trying to get electric buses and so on out there. And a conversation that I know that Councillor Curry's having with myself and with bus companies is about that movement to hydrogen. So it's separate to this application, but it's a really good point. And in terms of the moving by boat, a really good suggestion. We are having conversations. I mean, that's one of the reasons why you want to locate out in Grain, would be because of the access to the deep water berthing. So certainly I think that's one of the reasons why they are out there, and we can continue to have those conversations with them and other businesses to maximise the use of boats. But on the first point, we could absolutely put a condition on which requires them to submit further information to us in terms of those hours of movement.
Mr Chairman, I may be able to assist the committee with 2 points of clarification very quickly, but probably not.
Sorry, Councillor, you're not a member of the committee. Then I'll move. Anyway, I'll move to the Vice Chair to move the recommendations with, if you can, an additional recommendation about the timings of the lorry movements throughout the day. There is obviously a condition 3 which talks about a travel plan for workers, so you could actually expand that. Yes. Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Chair. I move the recommendations to approve the application subject to conditions 1 to 22 and adding in the condition to look at transport avoiding peak times. Thank you.
Seconded, Chair.
Those in favour of that recommendation?
That's 13, Chairperson.
Those against?
That's 2.
The application is approved. Thank you. Move on to item 10, which is in my ward and Councillor Field's ward. Mr Stubbs.
This is an application of reserve matters, which is following on outline permissions MC 203293, which was varied MC 1708 for the construction of 8 houses. The site is located in at the rear of 18 Broom Hill Road, which is an old pit, and is at a much lower level than the adjoining streets of Broom Hill Road and Medway's Way. Got some site photos. This is along Broom Hill Road, which has a green frontage. The site is behind here, and this is the entrance on this photo. And then from this way, there is a strip with mixture of green space and garages, and this application site is just located down here. And this is looking into the site. There's one property already in the location, which is 20 Broom Hill Road here, and the site wraps around here. And these are garages which were on site, which you can see from this photo, are quite dilapidated now. This is looking down into the quarry from Medway's Way. So, as I said before, this is a reserved matters application. This is the outline consented scheme for 8 dwellings. So already the number of houses, the access, the layout and the scale has already been approved under that outline application, and therefore we can only considering the landscape and appearance of the properties. So just to assist in the next few slides, this is house number 1, this is houses 2 to 5, 7 and 6, and number 8. So these are the proposed houses. They're proposed to be white render of grey roof tiles, grey slate roof tiles, grey windows and black downpipes. So there's house 1 here. This is the houses 2 to 5, which are 3-storey. Houses 6 and 7, which are semi-detached, and then a house 8 there. There's the materials information that was supplied. As I said, white render, grey slate, black downpipes and dark grey windows. This is the soft landscaping plan, which provides as the areas which were marked for landscaping in the outline and the details, and includes replacement trees along here and here and here and here. The information hasn't included the hard landscaping, but it's considered acceptable that this could be conditioned at a later date with other conditions in the outline consent, such as boundary treatment and lighting, and this will be considered in the same time, and therefore it was not considered that unacceptable to be considered by condition. Therefore, subject to the conditions set out in the report, was recommended for approval.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Field.
So I am a resident of Pepys Way, but I can't see the site, so therefore I've been advised that this is a declaration of interest. Thank you for sharing with that. Well, I'm aware, obviously, there was another application which we're not discussing here today. Looking at these plans, I do think it's appropriate for this site. This is the appropriate type of development for here. It is quite a secluded site. It is in the middle of a quarry. It's not overlooking. There is family housing. It's in keeping with other local family housing. And I think on the basis of this application, this seems a suitable development for this site.
Councillor Galvin?
Certainly agree that this is an appropriate use for the site. Bringing what is basically a derelict site back into use is a good one. Is there any treatment of the existing chalk face, or is it just going to be left bare with vegetation on it? Because in some developments they put interlocking wood, to hold it back. Is there any such treatment with this, or is it just going to be left sort of in its natural state?
It's proposed to be left in its natural state.
Which, by the way, includes some caves built into the side of it, which are actually directly under, well, it's now 64. Anyway, it's my ward, and I have, like Councillor Field, I have no problems with it. I welcome the application. I did, if you've looked at the agenda and seen that there was 3 objections to it, I think two of those objections where people have got themselves confused with another application that's going to come forward to the site. So did raise questions, but Mr. Harris said the ambiguous nature of at least two of the objections meant that it should have come to committee. So last time it came to committee because it was adjacent to a former councillor's house. This time there are objections, but actually objecting to mainly something that's not this. Anyway, there you go. Any other member? Move to the Vice Chair to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. I move the recommendation to approve the application subject to conditions 1 and 2 as set out in the main papers. Thank you.
Seconded, Chair.
Those in favour of the recommendation?
That's 15, Chairperson.
Full house. No, for once. No. The item has been approved. I move to the next application, which is item 11.
Apologies, Chairman. Thank you very much. Yeah, this is a very balanced application, members. This is the application site here. So you've got the A2 running through to Rainham, just through here, and parallel to that, you've got Birling Avenue. You've got Blaw's Lane coming up here to the traffic lights, just here, which is opposite the football centre, just there. Semi-detached house on there at the moment, and these properties are mostly semi-detached, but you've got some single properties as well. That junction there is closed off, and you'll see in the photographs. So this is the application property here. So you can see it's been extended already there, but then you can also get an idea as to the other properties in the road. So that's the property. You can see it's already got a large hard standing to the front, with a small garden area just in front of the window there. This garage looking like building is not used by a garage. It's a store, gym, so it's used ancillary to the main house, but not as a garage. But you can see that there's plenty of parking to the front. And this is Blaw's Lane coming up here. Looking from Blaw's Lane back towards the traffic lights and the football pitches here. This is the application property. That's that garage type building just in there. Now this photograph shows the traffic lights, it shows the application property here, and it shows how Birling Avenue is closed off at that point. So if you're going to get to this property, you have to go along the A2 into Birling Avenue and back down this way to get to it. If you're in a car, obviously if you're walking or cycling, you can get to a lot easier. But then on the opposite side of Blaw's Lane, you've got what was previously a semi-detached property, and clearly the ground floor of the two properties has been converted into a retail store. There is a flat above, and the flat is accessed from the side here. And you can also turn into the road just here off of this road, so you can turn into that road. So this is the application site. So I can see Blowers Lane, traffic lights just here, Denby Avenue, which you can turn into. Birling Avenue you can't. You've got to go along here and go around there to get to it. And then there are more commercial units further down Blaw's Lane as you go towards Splashes, a little bit further down. This is the application property itself as it exists at the moment. So you can see it is a semi-detached property which has had a number of extensions over the years. But this is what's proposed. It's an application to do a two-storey side extension with the ground floor element to be a what we call a Class EA shop. And I'll explain what I mean by Class EA in a second. So a shop on the ground floor, but then with an access here off of Blaw's Lane, pedestrian access off of Blaw's Lane, to a separate flat at first floor. Oops, sorry, I think at first floor with a study in there. Then they will extend the drop curb to provide an additional parking space in there. So 4 car parking spaces across the front, of which 2 will go with the existing house, 1 will be for the flat, and the other for the shop. And then there will be some electric vehicle charging points, a bike store there, and a bike store just in here. Elevation-wise, that's what the property currently looks like. And this is what it's proposed to look like. And this is where, I say, this is quite balanced, members. We're as an officer level, recommended for approval, but we're quite balanced on it in terms of the design, because it's just a very large extension to this property. So what's that impact in terms of street scene? What's its impact in terms of the character of the area? On balance, we feel it's acceptable, but it's something you need to give careful consideration to. In relation to the shop and the car parking, Class EA is a retail shop, but it also could be a hairdresser's or beauty salon. That would fall under Class EA as well. Barbers, that sort of thing. And then you've got the signage which goes across there. The applicant has responded to the objections, and that's set out on the 3rd page of your supplementary agenda advice, where he's tried to respond to the concerns regarding car parking, impact on on-street car parking, and access to the site. That's something that members will need to consider because of that proximity to the traffic lights, and whether you think this will generate parking which could impact on the free flow of traffic at those traffic lights. We all know that people, if they're just popping into a shop, don't necessarily always park safely or properly. Our highways officer has looked at it, and he's content with the car parking and the access to it. But it is a consideration. It is a balanced application that members need to consider. In relation to amenity, because the shop part is away from the residential, we're content that the shop itself won't cause harm to residential amenity. In terms of the flat above, there are conditions which recommend further noise surveys and treatment in terms of the floor between the shop and the flat, and also in relation to traffic generated noise, with it being on the junction at the traffic lights there. But we're satisfied that through submission of conditions that can be satisfactorily dealt with. So members, we're recommending approval, but it's a balanced one. Thank you, Chairman.
Members? Anybody? Okay. Anybody else? And Councillor Anaj?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not very sure with because you said that EA shop, it can be a retail shop or it can be a salon. And on the opposite side, we do have a retail shop there. So if the plan permission is given and it turns out that also becomes a retail shop, that also sells the same product as the other one. And normally after school, when children are crossing the road, because most of the time you see the children crossing the road to go and buy from the shop on the other side. So if that also becomes a retail shop and children should cross both roads, I believe that might be a cause of traffic, increase in traffic in that area, because you have 2 shops just about crossing from one road to another road. So some children will decide to cross the other side of the to the shop at the other side. Others will also decide to cross to this other side. So definitely children coming from our ward, Rainham girls, and the other schools might be crossing the road because that's where they go and buy their food and everything during school hours. So my point is that depending upon what they are going to use the shop for specifically, if it's retail, that might increase the traffic within that area, and that might even pose a danger or may become an accident spot to the children because they will have to cross into the other side, and others will also be crossing to the other side. So there might be a need to look into that traffic aspect and be the accident, posing an accident to children crossing from one side to the other side. So that's the point I would like to raise.
Oh, sorry. Oh, you've done it. Well done. Right, I'll start again. The set of traffic, better get closer. The set of traffic lights that at that junction, I don't think they're controlled with the green man and the red man, but as it's very close proximity to the Howard School and the girls' school as well, it might be an idea to have that in place. They have a bridge, obviously, that goes from one side of the main A2 to the other, which is very seldom used. But I feel it would benefit, to have this sort of crossing looked at, because it's obviously going to be a very busy crossing, irrespective to the shop being there. That's all I have to say about it. Thank you. Councillor Etheridge.
Thank you, Chairman. Some time ago within the council and in planning, it was stated very clearly that there would have no retail shops that would sell hot takeaway food that would be new close to a school. Does the same condition apply to this one?
Absolutely, Councillor Etheridge, thank you for raising that point. Absolutely good point. And that's why there is a condition which restricts it to Class EA, and that would not include a hot food takeaway, for that very reason that you've said. Thank you.
Any other member? Just if you could maybe advise highways that we have concerns about the signalling of lighting and the pedestrian crossing. Yeah. Move to the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I move the recommendation to approve the application subject to conditions 1 to 14 as set out in the main papers. Thank you.
I second that, Chair.
Those in favour of the recommendation?
That's 12.
Those against?
That's 3.
The application is approved. We move to the last item on the agenda, because item 13, as you know, has essentially been decided by delegated powers. Item 12.
Chairman, thank you very much. This essentially, as members will see from the report, is a renewal application. You'll see on page 106 that a planning permission has already been granted, essentially for this scheme, back in October 2018, but that permission has lapsed. It was only valid for 3 years. I think the considerations as set out in the report are, has anything materially changed in local policy, national policy, that fundamentally makes a different decision necessary in this case? And our view is that there have been no fundamental changes to national local policy which would make a difference in relation to this application. So this is the application site just in here, so you can see it there. Some street views, and you can see that these are the old precast concrete properties with which you see in a number of sites in Rochester, also out at Hoo, High Halstow. There were a number of those built through the 60s and 70s, and they have these mansard roofs. And then that's the rear of the site, that car parking area to the rear. Photos of the site, and this is what was approved back in 2018. So you can see a detached property with a mansard roof and a small garden to the back and the side, 2 car parking spaces to the front there. and it's effectively a renewal of that, but with a cycle store in the rear garden. And in terms of visibility, because it's right on the bend there are conditions which seek to restrict the height of what could be planted or placed there in terms of fencing or landscaping to protect that visibility. Chairman, we're recommending approval with the conditions as set out. Thank you.
So essentially is a repeat of a previous application that was approved and has lapsed. Any member? If not, I move to the Vice Chair straight away.
Thank you, Chair. I move the recommendation to approve the application subject to conditions 1 to 12 as set out in the main papers. Thank you.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you. Those in favour of the recommendation?
That's 15.
No, so finishing the meeting united. Excellent. Thank you for attending, and I trust that the first 3 items were useful for the long-term decision-making of this committee. Good night.